The ship was dying. Its lights flickered like the last breaths of a candle, shadows crawling across the twisted walls. The air was filled with the smell of burnt metal and smoke. Somewhere deep inside the broken hull, a single figure lay on the cold floor, trembling and bleeding. Her name was Lyra. She was a Tyrellian, a race known for their silver eyes and fragile skin that shimmered under light. But there was no light here anymore, only the endless dark. She tried to move, but pain shot up her leg like fire. Her suit was torn open, and every breath made her chest ache. She could feel something warm trickling down her side. Blood, maybe, or coolant from her half-broken armor. It didn't matter. She already knew she wasn't going anywhere. The explosion had come without warning. Her ship had been part of a small research convoy near the edge of a dying star system. They weren't soldiers. They were explorers, scientists, and engineers, searching for lost signals and ancient ruins left behind after the war. But the war never really ended. It only changed names. Pirates, raiders, and forgotten machines still drifted in the void, waiting for victims. Lyra's ship had been hit by one of them, a hidden mine buried in an asteroid's shadow. One moment they were scanning data, and the next everything turned into screaming and fire. Now she was the only one left. The command deck was gone. The crew's voices had vanished hours ago. Every time she called out on her comms, only static answered her back, a soft whisper that mocked her hope. She had dragged herself into the medical bay before her strength failed. The autodoc had tried to help her, but half its systems were dead. It gave her a weak pain shot, wrapped her leg, and then powered down forever. That was 2 days ago, or maybe 3. Time didn't exist here anymore. She lay on the floor, wrapped in a half-burned emergency blanket, watching the faint glow of a broken display fade away. Each flicker felt like a heartbeat, slower, weaker, until finally there was nothing left to see. The silence pressed down on her like a weight. Even the hum of the engines had stopped. No air pumps, no lights, no movement, only the distant creak of cooling metal. In the dark, her mind began to wander. She thought about her home world, the floating cities of Tyrell, the way sunlight shimmered on the oceans. She remembered the laughter of her crew, the sound of someone playing music in the lab while they worked. She remembered promises, simple ones like, "We'll be home soon," but promises meant nothing in the dark. Her breathing slowed. She felt so cold, the kind of cold that crawls inside your bones and stays there, the kind that makes you think of giving up. She whispered to no one, "I don't want to die here." Her voice sounded strange in the emptiness, small, weak. A flicker of panic ran through her chest. She turned her head, trying to see something, anything, but there was only blackness. Her eyes, trained to see in low light, saw nothing now. It was as if the void itself had swallowed her whole. For a moment she thought she heard something, a sound far away, a thud, then another. But when she strained to listen, it was gone. Maybe it was just the ship settling, or maybe it was her mind playing tricks. She closed her eyes. She thought about her mother, who used to tell her stories about the stars. Stories about how every soul becomes a light in the sky when it dies, shining for those who remember. Lyra smiled weakly. "Then maybe I'll be a small star," she whispered. "Just one more light among millions." Her suit's oxygen gauge blinked red. 1 hour left, she could end it now. A simple press of the release valve would make the pain stop. No more waiting. No more cold. Just peace. Her hand hovered over the control, trembling. But then something stopped her. A tiny fading sound in her earpiece, a crackle, faint but real. She blinked, holding her breath. Was that a signal? She adjusted the dial with shaking fingers. Static roared for a moment, then cleared just enough for a single broken word to slip through. "Hello?" Her heart skipped. She stared into the dark, unsure if she had imagined it. But then again, faintly, "Anyone alive?" The voice was low, rough, human. Her breath caught in her throat. Humans weren't supposed to be here. Not in this sector. Not anywhere near Tyrellian space. She pressed the comms button, her voice a trembling whisper. Who are you?" The static answered, soft and empty. Then came the reply, calm, steady, alive. "This is Lieutenant Aaron Cole, Terran Rescue Corps. Hold on. I'm coming to get you." And for the first time in days, maybe weeks, Lyra felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. The voice came again. Soft, crackling through layers of static and distance. "This is Lieutenant Aaron Cole. I picked up your distress beacon. If you can hear me, hold on." Lyra couldn't breathe for a moment. Her mind refused to believe it. A human here, in this dead part of space? It had to be a trick. Maybe her damaged comms were picking up an old recording. Or maybe her brain was simply making things up to comfort her before the end. She swallowed, her throat dry. "Lieutenant Cole, you said you're human?" There was a short pause, and then a faint chuckle came through her earpiece. "Last time I checked, yeah, Terran, you're Trellian, right? I'm reading your ship's ID now. You're in bad shape, friend." Friend, no one had called her that in a long time. Not since the war. Not since humans and Torellians had turned their differences into battlefields and scars. Her chest tightened. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. "Because you're alive," he said simply. "And that's all that matters." She lay there in the darkness, eyes wide, not knowing how to answer. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust the sound of his voice. But years of war stories screamed in her head. Stories about humans who burned colonies, who took no prisoners, who hated her kind. Her hands trembled. "You don't understand. My people. I don't care what your people did," he interrupted gently. "You're not them. You're someone who needs help. So let me help you." For a long time, Lyra didn't speak. The silence stretched between them like the endless space that separated their worlds. Then softly she whispered, I'm in the medical wing. Section 12. But it's collapsed, he finished. "Yeah, I'm looking at it now on the scan." "Don't worry. I've seen worse." She could almost hear the smile in his voice. Her heart beat faster. Against her will, hope began to stir inside her again, small and fragile but real. Is your ship close?" she asked. "Close enough," he said. "I can't dock with your main hatch, it's destroyed. But I can cut through one of the side corridors. Gonna take a little time, though. You just hang in there, all right?" Hang in there. 2 days ago she had given up. Now a stranger was asking her to hold on, and somehow she found herself wanting to try. She closed her eyes, listening to the faint sound of his breathing through the comms. It felt strange, comforting, somehow humanizing in a way she hadn't felt since before the war. "You sound calm," she said quietly. "Are all humans like that?" He laughed softly. "Not even close. I'm just pretending," she smiled weakly. The sound of his laugh felt like light, like something warm in all this cold emptiness. Minutes turned into an hour. Lyra drifted in and out of consciousness while Aaron kept talking to her through the comms. He told her stories to keep her awake, about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests she had never seen, about how the sunsets looked like fire and how the rain smelled like life. She listened, imagining it all. When her breathing grew shallow, his voice grew softer. "Hey, don't sleep yet, okay? You stay with me, Lyra. Just a bit longer." She forced her eyes open. "You know my name? Your beacon broadcast it. Lyra Torellian, Research Division. You're not built for war, are you?" She shook her head. "No, I study stars, or I used to." "Then I guess we've got something in common," he said. "I like stars too." The comm crackled as another explosion echoed through the remains of her ship. Metal groaned and shifted. Lyra screamed as debris rained down near her. "Lyra, you all right?" I think so," she stammered. "But the corridor's breaking apart." "Hang tight. I'm almost there." His voice grew louder, clearer, closer. She could hear the faint sound of tools striking metal, the grind of something cutting through the wreck. Sparks danced somewhere beyond the wall. Her heart pounded. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the sound. She wanted it to be louder, to mean he was real. "You hear that?" Aaron said, his tone full of effort. "That's me. Just a few more meters and I'll reach you." She swallowed hard. "You shouldn't be here. My ship's unstable. You'll die too." "Maybe," he said, breathing heavily. "But nobody dies alone today. Not if I can help it." The wall in front of her glowed red as his cutting torch burned through it. Each spark lit the dark for only a heartbeat, but that was enough. In those tiny flashes, she saw hope coming closer. Her vision blurred with tears. He was coming. A human was risking his life for her. The same species her people had once feared. Now breaking through the dark to reach her hand. And when the wall finally gave way and the first sliver of real light in days touched her face, Lyra realized she wasn't alone anymore. The wall burst open with a scream of metal and a shower of sparks. Lyra flinched. throwing an arm over her eyes as the first light she'd seen in days flooded into the room. It wasn't bright, just the narrow, shaky beam of a flashlight mounted on a human suit. But to her, it was blinding. For so long, she had lived in the dark that even a small light felt like the sun itself. The figure stepped through the smoke and debris, his silhouette sharp against the faint glow behind him. He was taller than she expected, his armor scorched and dented, his breathing loud through the comms. Then the light found her. The beam stopped on her broken body, her torn suit, the blood staining the floor around her. He froze for a second, maybe shocked to see a living Tyrellian, but instead of fear or disgust, she saw something else in his eyes through the cracked visor. Worry. He moved closer, kneeling beside her without hesitation. Hey, I've got you. You're safe now." Lyra tried to speak, but only a weak whisper came out. "You came." "Of course I did," he said softly, checking her injuries with gloved hands. "You think I'd let you die here alone?" She watched him work, fast but careful. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion. His voice stayed calm, though his chest rose and fell quickly with every breath. The way he moved reminded her of her old crew doctor, steady, focused, kind. Except this one was human. He pulled a small pack from his belt and attached a sealant to her torn suit. The hiss of the patch filled the silence. Warmth spread through her as oxygen slowly returned to normal. She gasped, feeling the first full breath in hours. Why would you help me?" He looked at her, eyes tired but gentle. "Because you're alive. That's enough reason." Her throat tightened. The words were simple, but they broke something open inside her, a wall she didn't know she'd built. She looked away, tears stinging her eyes. "My people, they called humans monsters." He let out a quiet laugh, low and rough. "Yeah, I've heard the same about Tyrellians. Then why save me?" He paused, meeting her gaze. "Because I don't listen to ghosts. The war's over. You're here, I'm here. That's what matters." Lyra didn't know what to say. The light flickered on his helmet, catching the faint curve of a smile beneath the scratches and dirt on his faceplate. When he reached for her arm to help her sit up, she flinched at first, old instincts, old fear, but then his touch was gentle, steady. He lifted her slowly, supporting her as if she were made of glass. Pain shot through her leg and she cried out. "Easy," he murmured. "Broken bone, maybe more. But I can carry you." Before she could protest, he scooped her into his arms. Her body felt weightless in the low gravity, but to him it must have felt like carrying a star's burden. You'll slow yourself down," she managed weakly. He shook his head, already moving toward the open hatch. "Then I'll go slower. But we're both getting out of here." The corridor outside was chaos, twisted metal, floating debris, fires flickering in the distance like dying candles. The light from his helmet cut through it all, creating a narrow path through the shadows. Each step echoed in the silence. The ship groaned around them as if protesting their escape. Lyra clung to him, too weak to hold her head up. Her vision blurred, and all she could see was that single beam of light cutting forward, guiding them through the dark. It reminded her of something her father once said when she was a child. "Even the smallest light can guide you home." For the first time, she understood what that meant. Halfway through the corridor, part of the ceiling collapsed behind them, sending sparks across the floor. Aaron shielded her with his body, taking the brunt of the impact. She felt the shock through his armor, heard him grunt in pain. "Aaron," she cried. "I'm fine," he said quickly, pushing forward again. Not stopping now. His breathing grew heavier, slower. She could tell he was hurt, but he never complained. He just kept walking, one step after another, light still shining ahead. Finally, they reached a sealed hatch, one of the maintenance exits. The controls were dead. Aaron placed her gently against the wall. "Stay still," he said. Then he pulled out his cutting torch again. The blue flame hissed, painting his face in soft light. Sweat ran down his temple. His gloves shook, but his eyes stayed focused. Lyra watched him, her heart aching. She didn't know humans could look like that, not fierce. Not cruel, but tired and kind and brave. She whispered, "You'll die trying to save me." Without looking back, he said, "Then at least I'll die trying to do something good." The metal gave way with a final burst of heat, and cold air rushed in from the other side. He turned back to her, a faint smile on his lips. "See? Told you I'd find you." And in that moment, with the smoke and the light swirling around him, he didn't look like a soldier or an enemy. He looked like hope itself. The hatch opened with a roar of escaping air and a flash of cold light. For a second, Lyra thought they had made it. But the next sound crushed that hope. The deep, distant boom of another explosion tearing through the ship's dying core. The floor tilted. The walls groaned. Fire spilled from the corridor behind them, licking at the edges of twisted metal. Aaron didn't hesitate. He grabbed her again, pulling her close against his chest. "Hold on!" he shouted over the noise. She clung to him, too weak to argue. The world around them shook like a living thing, growling and cracking as if angry they were trying to escape. A ceiling beam fell just behind them, throwing sparks across the floor. The light from his helmet flickered, but he kept moving, one heavy step after another through the smoke-filled passage. Lyra could hear his breathing, harsh, labored, but steady. Each inhale sounded like a promise. "I'm still here. We're still alive." The fire grew brighter behind them, a hungry red storm chasing them through the corridors. Aaron coughed, his voice rough through the comms. "We're close. There should be an access tunnel up ahead." Lyra's heart raced. "You can't make it in time. Leave me, save yourself." He turned his head, his visor catching the glow of the flames. She saw his eyes through the cracked glass, calm, determined, human. "Not happening," he said firmly. "I don't leave people behind." She wanted to argue, to scream that it wasn't worth it, that he didn't even know her, but the look on his face stopped her. It wasn't pride. It wasn't heroism. It was something deeper, something human she couldn't yet name. As they moved, the floor beneath them gave way with a violent snap. Aaron jumped, landing hard on the next deck down. The impact jarred his arm and pain flashed across his face. Still, he didn't let go of her. Lyra could feel the tremor in his muscles, the weight of his exhaustion. "Your arm," she whispered. "Still works," he said, forcing a grin. "That's good enough." They pressed on. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning fuel. Every few seconds, another explosion shook the ship and bits of debris rained from above. The emergency lights flickered weakly, casting the corridor in red pulses that made it look like a beating heart. Finally, Aaron spotted what he was looking for. A narrow maintenance tunnel leading upward. He set Lyra down carefully and began clearing debris from the entrance. His gloves were scorched, his movements slower now. Lyra watched him in silence, guilt tightening her chest. "You're risking everything," she said softly. "Why?" He paused, looking back at her. "Because once someone did the same for me." She frowned. "Someone saved you?" He nodded. "During the war. I was just a kid, barely a soldier. My ship went down near Tyrellian space. A medic from your side pulled me out of the wreck before his base collapsed. He didn't even know my name." Lyra stared at him, stunned. "A Tyrellian saved you?" Aaron smiled faintly. "Yeah, guess I'm just paying the debt forward." She didn't know what to say. Her people had always painted humans as cruel, selfish creatures. But this one, this broken, bleeding man, was nothing like that. When the tunnel was finally clear, Aaron reached out his hand. "All right. Time to go." Lyra hesitated, staring at his open palm. The light from his helmet reflected off her silver skin. Slowly, she reached out and took his hand. His grip was warm, solid, real. He pulled her into the tunnel, pushing her upward first, then climbing after. The metal walls were narrow, echoing with the sound of their movements. Below them, the fire roared, eating away what was left of the ship. Halfway up, a shockwave hit. The tunnel shook violently, throwing them against the sides. Aaron's flashlight went out, plunging them into near darkness again. For a second, Lyra panicked. "Aaron? Aaron!" "I'm here." His voice came through the dark, calm but strained. "Keep moving. Follow my voice." Her hands trembled as she climbed. She could hear the creak of the metal beneath her feet and the distant thunder of destruction below. When she slipped, Aaron caught her arm instantly, holding her tight. "Got you," he whispered. She could hear the pain in his voice, but also the fierce kindness that hadn't faded even once. They reached the top hatch. Aaron slammed the release lever and a rush of cold air hit them both. Starlight poured in, soft, distant, endless. For the first time since the explosion, Lyra saw the stars again. She gasped, tears slipping down her cheeks. Aaron smiled weakly, helping her out into the open. Beyond them floated a small emergency pod, its hull half cracked but intact enough to fly. He exhaled in relief. "We made it." Lyra turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. "You saved me." He shook his head. Not yet. We still have to get you home. And as the dying ship burned behind them, casting its last light into the cold void, Lyra realized something she'd never believed before. Sometimes, even in the darkest places, humans carried their own light. The pod was small, barely big enough for one person, and half of it was buried under fallen metal plates. The outer shell was cracked, leaking faint light through the seams. It looked hopeless. Lyra stared at it, her heart sinking. It's damaged, she whispered. Aaron knelt beside the pod, brushing off debris with his shaking hands. His gloves were black with soot, his shoulders slumped from exhaustion, but his eyes still burned with quiet determination. Damaged, he said, is still better than destroyed. He pried open the access hatch. The hinges groaned, metal scraping against metal. The inside was cramped but mostly intact, enough for a small life support system to function. Lyra hesitated, looking around the shattered deck. Fire and smoke drifted behind them. The ship groaned like a dying creature, its structure tearing itself apart piece by piece. Every sound was a warning. Every second another part of the hull was failing. You have to go, Aaron said, glancing at her. The ship won't last much longer. Her eyes widened. We both go. He shook his head slowly. The pod can't handle 2 life forms. Power's too low. Oxygen too. If we both get in, it'll fail before reaching orbit. She stared at him in disbelief. Then we'll take turns. We can... No. His voice was quiet but firm. You go. Lyra's throat tightened. I won't leave you here. He smiled weakly, the corner of his mouth lifting under the cracked visor. Lyra, I've been doing this job for 10 years. I've pulled people out of fires, off collapsing ships, even from war zones. I made a promise to myself a long time ago. If I could save one more life, I would. That's my mission. But you'll die, she said, her voice breaking. He looked up at the stars through the open hatch. Then at least I'll die knowing someone else lived. That's enough for me. She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. Humans are insane, he chuckled softly. Maybe, but we're stubborn too. For a moment, silence fell between them. The sound of the ship's final breaths filled the void, popping, groaning, breaking apart. Aaron crawled inside the pod, checking systems. Life support's still running. I can link your beacon to my signal. Once you reach orbit, someone will find you. He turned to her and extended his hand again. His voice softened. Come on, Starlight. Time to go. That name, Starlight, hit her heart like a whisper from a dream. No one had ever called her that before. She wanted to refuse him, to drag him inside with her, but the look in his eyes left no room for argument. She took his hand and let him guide her into the pod. The seat was cold against her back. He secured the straps gently, his fingers trembling as he locked each one in place. You'll feel a jolt, he said quietly, but it'll pass fast. Her voice cracked. Aaron, you don't have to do this. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the control panel and pressed a few buttons. The pod's lights flickered to life, soft blue glow washing over his face. Navigation's manual, he said. You'll need to stay awake until rescue comes. Promise me you'll fight to stay alive. Lyra nodded, her tears falling freely now. I promise. He leaned forward, resting one hand on the glass beside her. Through the smudged helmet visor, she could see the weariness on his face, but also the calm, unshakable kindness that had carried them this far. She whispered, What will you do? Aaron smiled faintly. Keep the beacon running, maybe. Watch the stars for a while. Her heart broke. You'll freeze before rescue arrives. Then I'll just pretend I'm home, he said softly. Back under the sky, the pod systems beeped, signaling launch readiness. He looked at her one last time. Goodbye, Lyra. She reached out, pressing her palm against the glass. Goodbye, Aaron. He covered her hand with his own from the outside. Their eyes met, 2 souls from different worlds, sharing the same fragile moment of light. Then the pod door slid shut with a hiss. Lyra could still see him through the small viewport, standing there in the smoke and flickering light. He raised his hand in a small salute. The engines roared weakly, and the pod shot away from the dying ship. Through the window, she watched Aaron grow smaller and smaller until he was just a speck of light among the wreckage. Then came silence. Only the soft hum of the pod remained. Lyra leaned her head against the glass, her heart breaking. You foolish, brave human, she whispered. You gave me the stars. The ship exploded behind her, a bright bloom of light spreading across the void. For a brief moment it looked like dawn, like the birth of something new instead of the end. She closed her eyes, clutching the necklace she wore beneath her suit. "I'll remember," she whispered. "Always." And as the pod drifted toward the endless horizon, carrying her away from the ruins and the fire, she felt his words echo through her heart. No one dies alone in the dark. The stars looked endless from the small window of the pod. Lyra floated in silence, her body weak, her heart heavy. The hum of the pod's engines was soft, almost comforting, but every sound reminded her that she was alone. She could still see the fading glow of the explosion behind her, the last light of the ship that had been her home. Somewhere in that burning wreck was the man who had saved her, the human who refused to leave her behind. Aaron Cole. His name echoed in her mind again and again. She pressed a trembling hand against the glass, staring at the void. "Please," she whispered, "let him be alive." The pod drifted through the debris field. Pieces of the destroyed ship floated all around, glinting fragments of metal, sparks of light, memories of the dead. Lyra's tears floated up in tiny droplets before the pod's air system pulled them away. Her suit was damaged, her leg burned, but she didn't care. All she could think about was the human who had called her starlight and smiled even as the world burned around him. Hours passed. Maybe more. The clock on the pod flickered, but she stopped counting. She felt lightheaded, her vision blurring from exhaustion. The beacon Aaron had linked to her pod was still transmitting. A faint signal pulsed every few seconds. Each pulse reminded her he was still down there somewhere, surrounded by fire and silence. She closed her eyes and imagined his voice. "Hang in there, Lyra. You'll see the stars again." She smiled weakly. "I see them now, Aaron, but they don't shine the same without you." Her breath came slow and shallow. The cold inside the pod crept into her bones. The air smelled faintly of metal and burned plastic. She was drifting between sleep and consciousness when a sharp beep cut through the silence. Signal detected. Her eyes snapped open. The radar screen blinked, faint at first, then stronger. Another ship. Her heart leapt. "Rescue," she breathed. She pressed the comm switch. "This is Lyra Terrellian of the vessel Aurora. My ship has been destroyed. Please, someone respond." Static filled her ears for a few seconds. Then a clear voice broke through. "Lyra Terrellian, we read you. This is the Galactic Patrol Ship Vanguard. We're tracking your beacon. Hold steady, we're coming." She laughed softly, half in disbelief. "Aaron, it worked," she whispered. "Your beacon worked." As the patrol ship approached, the pod began to shake from the pull of their tractor beam. The light grew brighter through the window, blinding her for a moment. When she woke again, she was lying in a medical bay. White lights, clean air, soft voices. For a heartbeat, she thought it was all a dream. A medic leaned over her. "You're safe now," he said gently. "You were found drifting near Sector 19. You're lucky, we got your signal just in time." Lyra tried to sit up. "The human... Aaron Cole, did you find him?" The medic's face softened. He hesitated before answering. "We found the wreck. No life signs detected." "I'm sorry," her chest tightened. The words hit her harder than the blast that had destroyed her ship. She turned her face away, silent tears falling down her cheeks. The medic placed a hand on her shoulder. "We did find his beacon still running. The man must have kept it on until the very end. It led us straight to you." She closed her eyes, gripping the edge of the bed. "He said he'd keep it running," she whispered. He promised. Days passed before she could walk again. The crew of the Vanguard treated her kindly, giving her food, warmth, and quiet space to heal. But even as her body grew stronger, a piece of her heart stayed behind, with the man who had refused to give up on her. One night she sat by the viewport watching the stars. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and tired, but her eyes were alive again. She whispered into the glass as if he could still hear her. "You said no one dies alone in the dark. You were right, Aaron, you didn't die alone. I'm here, and I'll carry your light." A faint glimmer outside caught her attention. It was the beacon. They had salvaged it from the wreck and placed it in the observation bay, a small piece of him still shining. Every few seconds it pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Blink, pause, blink. It was as if he was still out there whispering, "I'm still with you." Lyra smiled through her tears. "I'll keep your light alive," she said softly. "I promise." The stars stretched endlessly before her, cold, vast, beautiful. But now, when she looked at them, she didn't feel alone anymore, because somewhere, somehow she knew. Aaron's light would never fade. Months had passed since the rescue. The galaxy had moved on as it always did. New ships flew through the same stars that had witnessed destruction, carrying new lives, new stories. But for Lyra Terrellian, nothing was the same. She had joined the Vanguard's crew for now, helping them map uncharted sectors. It kept her busy, but every time she saw a star flicker in the distance, she thought of him, of Aaron Cole, the human who had reached out his hand when everyone else had turned away. Sometimes, in the quiet of space, she swore she could still hear his voice in the hum of the ship. "Come on, Starlight. Time to go." Those words had saved her. Those words still guided her. One evening, while the Vanguard drifted near a nebula glowing soft blue and gold, Lyra stood alone at the observation deck. She held a small metal object in her hand, Aaron's beacon. The engineers had repaired it, restoring its soft pulse. It blinked gently in her palm, slow and steady like a heartbeat. Captain Drain, a tall human with kind eyes, approached quietly. "You still keep that thing with you, huh?" She smiled faintly. "It's not just a thing. It's him. A part of him." The captain nodded. "I heard what he did for you. Not many would have made that choice." Lyra turned to the window. The nebula shimmered like a sea of fireflies. "He didn't just save my life," she said softly. "He reminded me what life means." That night she couldn't sleep. The ship was silent, engines humming like a lullaby. She sat by her bunk, holding the beacon close to her chest. Her eyes were wet, but her heart felt strangely calm. For the first time, she wasn't crying because of loss. She was crying because of gratitude. She remembered his cracked visor, his rough voice, his smile under the firelight. She remembered how his hand had reached for hers even when everything else had fallen apart. He had been human, fragile, stubborn, and endlessly brave. And now, because of him, she was alive. The next morning, she made a decision. She requested a small shuttle and asked permission to return to the wreckage site of the Aurora. The captain hesitated at first, but when he saw the determination in her eyes, he agreed. When the shuttle dropped out of warp, silence filled the cockpit. The field of wreckage stretched endlessly, broken metal, drifting panels, frozen fragments of what once was a ship full of life. Lyra floated through the ruins slowly, scanning with her suit's sensors. There was no sign of human remains, no trace of Aaron's body, only twisted metal and quiet emptiness, and yet, something felt different. Her scanner picked up a faint signal, a weak pulse buried deep beneath the debris. She followed it carefully, heart pounding. As she cleared away the metal pieces, she found a piece of armor still intact. On the shoulder, the name was clear, though scratched and burnt. A. Cole, her breath caught. She reached out and touched it gently. "You really stayed until the end," she whispered. She didn't cry this time. Instead, she smiled, a small trembling smile filled with warmth. "You didn't die alone, Aaron," she said softly. "You live here now, in every star, in every breath I take." She attached his nameplate to the beacon and released it into space. It floated gently, drifting toward the light of the nebula. The soft pulse blinked one last time before fading into the endless glow. Lyra watched until she could no longer see it. Then she whispered, "Goodbye, my human. I'll carry your light across the stars." Years later, legends began to spread through the galactic network. Travelers spoke of a strange signal sometimes heard near the ruins of the Aurora. A soft, steady pulse, 3 beats, pause, then 1. Some said it was just interference. Others swore it sounded like a heartbeat. And those who followed it often found their systems stabilizing, their ships guiding safely through storms and debris, as if something or someone was still watching. They called it the Lightkeeper's signal. But for Lyra, it was something simpler. Every time she passed that region, she would whisper into her comms, softly enough that only she could hear, "Still watching over me, aren't you?" And sometimes, just sometimes, her radar would blink in response. One soft pulse, her lips curved into a quiet smile. "I know," she would whisper. "I miss you too." As the Vanguard sailed away through the sea of stars, Lyra looked out one last time. The universe was vast, cold, and endless, But somewhere in that great dark she knew a single human heart had burned bright enough to light the way, and it would never fade. Because she was left to die in the dark, until a human reached out his hand, and that hand had carried her back into the stars,